Hey guys, Ryan Earnhardt here from CreativeSoundLab.tv. Well, today we're doing something kind of cool. It's kind of a psychedelic phase-like effect that we're creating for drums. We're only using two SM57s. It's a very affordable effect. We're actually creating this effect by swinging the microphones, and it creates a phase-like sound. In fact, it's actually real phase. We're creating an effect through physics. So check it out. Here's what it sounds like without it, and then with the phase effect. Okay, so this is pretty cool. Now, we've done this before with guitar amps. We had a series about creating effects, real effects, with two SM57s, and I encourage you to check out that series if you'd like to see more about this XY pair and all the different things that I tried in that 3-video series on guitar amp. But this is drums, and I know in that series a couple of you commented that you wanted to hear it on drums, and that's what we're going to be doing today. But I also will say that in the Tape-Op book, I don't know if it's volume 1 or volume 2, I know they do have a technique where you have a moving room microphone that is performed, somebody's walking with it, and so I'm not sure who came up with this technique exactly, but I think it's been around for a while. And of course, this pendulum idea is something that I've been experimenting with. So it definitely is a really cool technique that's easy to set up. It really costs nothing at all. You just use a couple spare SM57s. Now, the main goal today was to really get the microphones coming in towards the kit and swinging back out again. Now, when you have a close mics on the kit and the room mic is changing its distance, we should, in theory, hear the phase relationship change, and it should create a phase effect. Side-to-side motion won't yield the same result. It'll create a variation in the stereo field, but my main goal for this effect was to come in and go back out again. And of course, any sort of spinning motion is just kind of icing on the cake to make this even cooler. Now, I realized that pretty quickly this was not a one-man job, so I went back to the house and recruited my niece and nephew to help me out today. Now, the compression is a little bit tricky. You can really get a lot of mileage out of this effect if you use the right compression settings. So let's check those out. So the idea was to really add some sustain. With the guitar amps, we had all that sustain. We could really hear when the mics were moving closer, and you have one stationary, one moving, and it's creating that phase effect. With drums, it's hard because you have just transients, and does it really sound like a phaser? I don't know. So we got to add compression to hopefully simulate sustain. In this case, it's the sustain of maybe the toms or the cymbals, but a lot of the room. What's interesting about this is that it's not my usual compressor setting for a room mic. It's a little bit longer of a release time. Here's maybe what I might do on a typical room mic kind of situation. Okay, maybe even faster release, okay, where you get that kind of distorted sound, but it's all about that sustain of the room using a fast release. With this, I found it was interesting because I went to a little bit longer release, and it kind of had this a little bit kind of gooier sustain here, that it wasn't so maybe choppy, but it actually made it a little bit better for our goals of connecting the hits of the drums. Okay, so it's in two parts, so that doesn't give us the effect, but when we crank the ratio, the compressor really hugs the sound of the drums, and we get a lot of that breathing. And the idea is to make it breathe and make it sustain and connect the notes together. You hear that? Hear the sustain of those toms? Like, they almost sound like timpani there. See? Before we had a very kind of rock and roll kind of thing. Very noisy, but here we're just trying to connect the notes. So that was really interesting, I thought, specifically for this technique. The other side of this is the stationary mics, right? Because we're combining these. So this isn't too crazy. It's fairly kind of standard stuff, just keeping stuff under control. Here's without. Here's with. And this compressor is just kind of cutting down on that snare. It's just adding some sustain to that snare sound. You get one sustain that's stationary, one sustain that's moving, and we're actually able to appreciate and really bring out that phase effect. So one thing I noticed is that there's a lot more to play with sonically in a guitar amp than there is a drum set. There's just a lot more mid-range information that you can really hear the phasing effect. With the drum set, it can be kind of hard. You know, there's cymbals that sustain. It sounds actually amazing on the toms, and especially the snare. When it gets right up close to the snare and kind of spins around, we get this really cool kind of weird snare effect that sounds really, really cool and really big and kind of fat sounding. You know, maybe this is something that you lay down the drums in parts, so you avoid playing the cymbals when you're using this. And that way you don't have this, you know, crazy wash of cymbals. You can compress as much as you like. And the cymbals can be captured with a standard pair of overheads, however you like to set those up. And that way you don't get a ton of cymbal wash that really just dominates the mix. So I'd love to know what you think of this. I'll be hanging out in the comments below.